So what other?
Oh yeah, I've already introduced myself.
Oh, I'm sorry. As far as I know, we've never done any work in the Netherlands, so though I have been to Amsterdam a couple times.
Maybe I can ask you a first question, Ms.
Sure.
Greenberg. I was wondering about polling in general, but maybe especially focused on New Hampshire. But don't you believe that sometimes big polls in this primary elections influence more the mind of the voters than that the polls reflect what the voters think?
Actually, I don't think that's the case, because if that were true, then Obama should have won New Hampshire. unless you're arguing that Clinton supporters saw that Obama was ahead in the New Hampshire polls.
Yeah, or that independent voters saw that Obama was going to win anyway and switched to McCain.
Well, first of all, let me just say, overall, with the exception of New Hampshire, and in some cases, some of the polls in South Carolina, the polls have been very accurate, especially on the Republican side. So I think we get fixated on the polls in New Hampshire and we say, oh, we can't predict, these elections. But I actually think, for the most part, they've been pretty accurate. One thing that's very difficult when you poll, especially in primary elections, is that you don't know who's going to vote, and especially this year, because turnout has been so high, and there's been turnout among groups that generally haven't voted in high numbers. So, for instance, in Iowa, people under the age of 30, there was huge turnout in Iowa.
And is there coming the cellular phone landline problem in again?
There may be some cell phone landline problem with younger people, but so to step back for a minute, when we do a survey, one of the most important things we have to figure out is, who are we talking to? What does our sample look like? If your sample is wrong, your poll is wrong. You can write the best survey in the entire world and have the best interviewers in the entire world, but if you talk to the wrong people, then your survey is wrong. And you have to make a set of assumptions going into your survey when you draw your sample. Where do you think the votes are going to come from? I think X percent is going to come from this town, X percent from that town. And it doesn't really matter where you pull your sample from, whether you do what we call random digit dial surveys, where you dial people randomly, or if you draw from voter lists. You have to make a set of assumptions. So when you don't know who's going to vote, when you have this extraordinary turnout that we've seen, it is very hard for your polls to be right. So I think that's actually a big part of what's been going on, is that this turnout has been so high. I mean, we have states, we were just talking about New Jersey. New Jersey has not had a competitive presidential primary since 1984. We have no idea who's going to vote in this primary, because we look back on the records and we can't figure it out. So I think that we have to be a little bit kind to the people who are polling in primaries these days, because it's just, again, especially on the Democratic side, the turnout's not been as high on the Republican side. It's very hard, even at a starting point, to know who's actually going to vote in these elections.
Thank you.
About these samples, how far do you go with, is it just about gender and age, or are you taking many more demographic facts into account?
Sure. We take a number of, when we do a survey, at the outset we stratify by region. We need to make sure that we're interviewing the right number of voters from each part of whatever area it is, whether it's a state or a congressional district or a city. We have to make sure that we have 10 voters from town X and 15 voters from town Y, and that goes back to the answer I gave earlier, is we have to figure out, using historical voting data, to figure out how many voters we think are going to come out of each area. So at the outset, we stratify by region. We also require that that there's a certain percentage of women and a certain percentage of men, because we pretty much know what the gender breakdown is, and usually it's always more women than men. In general elections, it's usually about 52% female, 48% male, but in Democratic primaries, it can be closer to 60% female, because women are more likely to be Democrats, so Democratic primary voters are going to be more female. When we get the data back, and one more thing, it's very hard to get people who are younger on the phone, partially because of the cell phone issue, but partially because younger people tend to not be home when we call at night, or they live in dorms or frats or sororities, or they have roommates, and so it's just much harder. They move more often, so we also impose a bit of a quota at the outset on getting people who are younger in our surveys, and basically have extra clusters of people who are younger in the sample to get younger people. When we get data back, then we do something called post-stratification weighting, and we weight often on race. It is much harder to get African Americans and Hispanics in our survey for a variety of reasons. But we know, based on census data, what percentage should be African American or should be Hispanic, so we can weight up the minority voters in our sample. And we'll sometimes weight on education. It's a little harder to know. Once we get beyond that, it's much harder to know what the actual population demographics are, and we'll use exit polls and census data and other places to try and figure it out. generally, we don't actually have to wait that much. Even though we have all these problems with cell phones and other issues, generally our surveys, with the exception of not enough young people and not enough minorities, which is not a not insignificant problem, generally they come in looking pretty close to what they should. When we're waiting by 2 or 3 percentage points. We're not waiting by 10 or 15. Now that will probably change over time as it gets harder and harder to reach people. We'll start seeing much more of a skew in our data, but right now it's actually the surveys still look pretty good. So.
Well, in the Netherlands, there's a big part of people who vote who are fluctuating between parties that one day choose one. Do you think that's also a problem that plays now in these elections, and especially in younger people?
Partisanship is still a pretty important predictor in the U.S. of how you're going to vote. If you say you're a Democrat, there's a 90% chance you're going to vote for the Democratic candidate. If you say you're a Republican, and even if you say I'm an independent, we have a question where we say, well, which party do you lean towards? Do you lean towards the Democratic Party or Republican? Even people who say they're independent but tend to vote for the party they lean towards. So the pure independent slice of the electorate is pretty small. It's maybe 10 or 15% of people who say truly they don't. I think it's hard to compare to Europe because you've got multi-party systems where parties can sort of can break up and reform, and their ideological position can capture some sector of the electorate. And I mean, I don't know anything about the parties in the Netherlands, so I can't really comment. But the multi-party systems, it's easier to kind of move from party to party because there may be multiple parties that represent your ideological worldview. In the U.S., in a two-party system like the U.S., it's much harder to see that kind of movement.
Within the Democrats?
What do you mean?
Yeah, within like between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, do you think people switch in between those?
Well, I mean, right, it's hard to say what is going on at the moment because John Edwards has dropped out of the election, so it's really just two candidates, and we're seeing Barack Obama increasing his share, and Hillary Clinton's has actually stayed fairly steady. So I think what you're seeing is it's less that Hillary Clinton supporters are going to vote for Obama. It's that John Edwards, it's that undecided, it's, are kind of moving towards Obama, but also it's likely that it's new voters. I mean, Obama, one of the exciting things about Obama as a presidential candidate is he actually brings new voters into the electorate. Hillary Clinton doesn't really bring new voters in. So some of the folks that are moving towards Obama are likely people who are new. So again, if you look at the Gallup tracking poll that came out yesterday, Hillary Clinton is only leading by 4 points now nationally, which is that's a pretty substantial narrowing of the gap. I mean, she was leading by double digits last year. But again, if you look at her line, she's had as high as 48 and as low as about 42, 43, and that's where she is now. So she's not fluctuating that much, but Obama has been going up and up and up and up.